Hello everyone, Carnasa here, and welcome back to Coming Home Redux. I'm a little bit better today, but I'm still not 100%, so it's not going to be up to my usual excited standard, but it might be a little bit better than the past 2 episodes. And I would like to say a massive thank you to everyone that wished me well in the past couple of episodes in the comments. It was really nice reading through those messages, so thank you very, very much. Anyway, at the beginning of this, we unlocked big fairings in the last episode, at the end of the last episode. So in order to celebrate that, I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a really big launch vehicle. So this is going to be the Barbarian one, and we're going to attempt to go back to reusing our first stages again. Although that being said, we're not going to reuse the solid rocket boosters unless I put parachutes on them or something like that. But to be honest, that seems a little bit far-fetched. And this is a science career, so I'm not gaining anything from reusing anything apart from style points. So I don't think I'm going to bother with that, but maybe that could be something that I do look into in the future. Anyway, we built Barbarian 1. That was a very quick time lapse, and it can lift about 76 tons to low road orbit. I'm used to playing real solar system, damn it. But what we're going to be working on now is going to be the main focus for this video. And this is going to be a mobile surface base that we send down to Lua. It is the Mobile Science Base, I think is what the name of this video is going to be. I mean, I've already created the thumbnail for this, so I'm fairly sure that that is going to be the name. But what this is going to do is it's going to go down to Lua. We're going to have to send a crew separately. They do not come included. And it's going to drive all around using Bon Voyage and all of those kind of awesome mods to gain us as much science as physically possible from the surface of Rhodes' closest moon. And we're going to be able to send a crew of 3 down in this. It's going to be the first time that I am able to do that, because obviously in the last episode I unlocked big capsules, and before then I was only able to send 2 crew anywhere. So that's going to be an exciting new addition. But anyway, what we have on this rover is a laboratory, so we can research whilst we are on the surface of Lua, which will gain us a lot of science. And we've pretty much got every single scientific experiment that I have that we can run on a moon that has atmosphere. Almost said planet then, but no. Lua is a moon of road. I am missing 2 very critical two very critical experiments is what I meant to say though for this. And that is the Mystery Goo unit and the Science Junior. I forgot to place those on, and I definitely had room to fit those on this rover, on this mobile science base, which is a little bit of a shame. We're going to lose out on a lot of science from that big mistake. Anyway, because Lua is a moon that has an atmosphere, I did just place a couple of wind turbines on because I thought, well, that might be able to generate us some power, which would be very nice. However, after learning my mistakes from the Hydrus rover, I have also slapped solar panels all over this so that if I do want to use Bon Voyage, well, then we should be able to. Now, the finishing touches of this are placing on some parachutes, and this is going to be a problem later on. So I copied and pasted those on the actual vehicle. That doesn't copy and paste the settings, so that's going to be a little bit of a worry later on. But what we're going to do now is take this science base, this mobile science base, out for a little bit of a test drive around the Kerbal Space Center at Rhodes to begin with, because I don't want to get all the way over to Lua and find out that I've put the wheels on the wrong way. That would be really, really bad, and that is definitely something that I have done before in a save. I've put the wheels on so that they turn up and down rather than left to right. There is a set of wheels that I have in this mod pack that do that. But we can see that our little joyride of the Space Center is completely successful. And with that, I am more than happy to send this on its way to Lua. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We have whacked this on top of the Barbarian 1 and we are launching to Lua without a crew. We're not going to have any crew on. We're going to send one of those separately. It does not all come together as a complete package, no. So the rover, the science lab, the mobile science base, whatever you want to call it. What do you want to call it? I've had a couple of suggestions for this. We had the Frank truck by Duck, not the Franken truck, no, the Frank truck. There were a few comments in the premiere that I did as well recently, so if you've got a better name for this other than the Lude, which is what I called it, or the Frank truck, or whatever you want to call it, please do leave them in the comments below. And that's something that I usually don't really do much of on YouTube. I don't do the whole YouTube thing of being like, oh, like and subscribe to my channel, do all of this, do all of that. And I feel like I probably should, because that's a good way to promote your content, and I don't really pay too much attention to that as well. And talking of that, I do have a Patreon as well that I never ever talk about. So if you do ever fancy supporting this channel and doing what I do, there is a link to my Patreon in the description. And yeah, any help is greatly appreciated with making these videos. But that's enough of that plug. I feel a little bit weird for talking about all of that. I never usually do that. I'm not like, oh, make sure you like and subscribe and do all of that, because that's not really me. But yeah, that's more than enough of that. Anyway, we are on our way up to orbit with the tank, and it has gone rather well. Once again, I do seem to be using a rather low thrust to weight ratio stage for my upper stages though, so I'm not going to be using ascent guidance. I'm going to be flying this using smart ASS instead, but I don't really mind about that. It's okay. Someone did recommend a feature for me to try to see if that will work with ascent guidance, and I've not had the chance to try that out yet, but I will be doing that at some point soon. But what we're going to do now is try and land our first stage booster. Like I said, I wanted this to be recoverable. We've obviously not recovered the solid rocket boosters because, well, we just let them get smashed into the ground. We don't care about those solid rocket boosters, but here you can see we are coming down rather nice and gently, and we didn't spin out of control. Although we did hit the ground at 7.1 meters per second, and that was enough to cause that to break. So I did change the design of this a little bit. I went for air brakes rather than grid fins, because one thing that I noticed with the older design that spun out of control and just smashed into the ground didn't really slow down in time either. So I needed a bigger surface area to try and slow that first stage booster down. So that's why I went for the air brakes, because they are much bigger and I can tweak scale them up. And tweak scale is obviously fantastic for making things bigger. And that did really help with that. That obviously proved that I can recover them as long as I do the landing perfectly and I don't hit the ground a little bit too hard. It was a shame. It would have been nice to have recovered that booster, but oh well, there is always next time. And whilst I've been nattering on about recovering boosters, we have made our way over to Lua with the base. And of course, we are just going to capture ourselves into a nice low Lua orbit before we attempt to descend upon the surface. And I did mention earlier on, well, yes, there is a little bit of a problem with this landing. The parachutes don't work. Only one of those 8 parachutes is configured to the mass of this tank. And as we will see momentarily when we run out of fuel in this stage, there we go, we are going to arm the parachutes and they are all going to go off. The one at the front is much, much larger than all of the others, because that is the parachute that is correctly configured. So here I am, panicking, thinking, oh my god, I've got to deploy all the parachutes, try and slow ourselves down as quickly as possible. But we are still going to be facing nose up because, well, the big parachute is at the front. And that does only slow us down to about 20 meters per second. But luckily, we do land on the back wheels, and those wheels are huge. They're enormous. They are absolutely indestructible. Essentially, they are made of very stern stuff even, and we are able to touch down and nothing does break. And we deployed the wind turbines, and unfortunately Lua's atmosphere is a little bit too thin, too tenuous to get anything out of that. But now that we've got this down, well, we are going to need to send a crew along separately. So that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to come back to the vehicle assembly building and we are going to work on our first 3-manned crew vehicle. So, the design philosophy of this a bit, my voice is going a little bit now. I said I'm not completely 100% yet. The design philosophy of this is that surface base, the mobile science base, well, I want that to remain on Lua for like 3 months or thereabouts. I want it to stay on the ground for a really long time. So I'm not going to be able to do an Apollo-styled mission at Lua, because of Principia, Lua, any orbit that we have around it will be completely unstable. So, if we want an orbiter, if we're staying on the ground for 3 months, well, that's just going to crash into the surface of Lua after a couple of weeks. That's not going to be any good, so we are going to go for a direct ascent style of mission for this lander, which isn't as efficient as doing Apollo style, but I filled this up with 3,175 meters per second of delta V or thereabouts, which should be more than capable of getting us off the surface of Lua, back to road, and also being able to do a little bit of the landing burn as well, or the vast majority of the landing burn. I didn't want to pack parachutes on here because parachutes are heavy, and as we saw with the wind turbines, well, Lua's atmosphere really isn't that great at slowing us down. Yeah, there's barely any atmosphere there until you get to the really, really low levels of Lua, and the base isn't landed there, so that's going to be a little bit difficult. Anyway, we have pretty much finished work on the lander now, so what I'm going to do is come and create a trans-Lua injection stage, which will be more than enough to propel us to Lua and also capture us into a Lua orbit. And to be honest, we'll also have enough to start our descent burn onto the surface of Lua as well. It's the complete package, really, if you ask me. It can do absolutely everything. So originally I was thinking of using the newfangled Barbarian, but it turns out that that would have been complete overkill. So we're going to grab a Paladin one. Obviously, the Paladin one's not as great because it isn't reusable. The first stage isn't reusable, but that is something that I will do in the future. I will redesign all of these so that they do have reusable first stages. But that has all been built up now. It's time to come to the launch pad where we are going to be launching 3 Kerbals for the first time in this series at once. And they are going to be Sticker Kerman, Hernan Kerman, and Phineas Kerman. So Hernan Kerman is actually one of the orange Kerbals. He's one of the original 4. And the reason why this is his first flight is he's an engineer. And up to this point, I've not really had any use for an engineer. Obviously, I want pilots to pilot the craft. And I'm using scientists. I'm abusing scientists, essentially, to get as much science as I can from labs and mystery goo units. So they have been much more mission critical than engineers. And if I'm honest, I don't even need an engineer on this mission either. I just thought I'd bring him along just for the sake of it. Anyway, that there was me showing the interior of the Mark III cockpit from stock. It is one of the mods that I have got. It's IPEX Advanced IVA or something like that. I don't know exactly what it's called. It is in the description though. The mod is in the description and it makes it look fantastic inside the stock capsules. Basically like playing Re-entry Orbital Simulator in KSP. You can flick so many buttons and they all do stuff. It's really cool, and I'm a massive child when it comes to flicking buttons in spacecraft. I do really enjoy it. But anyway, we have made our way up to orbit with this, and as I did mention before, we have, well, yeah, the Paladin was more than enough to begin our trans-Lua injection. So I didn't mention that before. What I said was that our TLI stage would be enough to do everything. Well, it can do. It doesn't even need to do everything now because the launch vehicle was more than capable. I seem to be overbuilding everything in this series, but I suppose it's better to overbuild than to underbuild because we wouldn't really want to leave our astronauts or our Kerbonauts or whatever you want to call them, our Kerbals, stranded on the surface of Lua, and hopefully we will not be doing that because, well, there's 3 of them this time round. The stakes are much higher than they ever have been before. But we have made our way to Lua. Now we're going to time warp a little bit until the mobile base is roughly underneath us or underneath our orbit line so we can burn and try it and land as close as possible. Although I was a little bit too eager here and I thought, well, I don't want to time warp around again just in case I miss it. So I started my burn and I realized that I was way off. Luckily though, I have all of that delta V remaining in that TLI stage, so we can perform an inclination change and get pretty darn close to the actual base that we're trying to land near. So We have ditched the TLI stage now, and we are coming down with our last stage, and we're only going about 100 meters per second because those air brakes are really helping us. Here I did notice that we were going to be landing on a bit of a slope, so I thought, that's not going to be very good. Slopey terrain is quite difficult to land on, so we did a little bit of a hop and then landed on this nice flat ground. And we are only 2.2 kilometers away from the base, which is great. It means it's within render range, so we can just hit bracket on my keyboard, come and grab the base, the tortoise, the Frank truck, the whatever you want to call it, and drive it over rather quickly. Doing a few skids as we go past, Tokyo Drift, that kind of style, but we have made it over, and we are nice and close for our 3 Kerbals on board the lander to not have to walk very far, because I don't think they would want to walk far. But Kerman, almost said Cortez then, that's what he's called in the Realism Overhaul series, is the first Kerbal to step foot on the surface of Lua. Gonna grab that flag, first Lua landing, and we even brought a rover. It is a rover, because it's got wheels and all of that, and it does rove. Technically it's a rover, but I do like to think of this as more of a surface base, because it's got a laboratory, it's got habitats, it can last upwards of probably about 120 days on the surface before it needs to be refueled. And that is one thing that I do want to do in the future. I can't make fully sustainable bases yet because I don't have the technology required to harvest resources from the ground yet. I need to unlock drills, and I don't have drills yet. So I'm thinking of coming back at a later point and obviously making something a little bit more permanent. This is kind of like a stepping stone between just your bog standard lander where you stay on the surface for about 2 seconds before you grab all the science and head back. No, we are going to stay on the surface of Lua for about 90 days I want to go for. And then that way we can try and get as much research done in that scientific lab as possible. And it's going to be great. We'll get loads of science from that. Once again, I'm going to do a little bit of a time lapse through a drive because there are 4 biomes on Lua. There's the atmospheric midlands, which is where we have come down. There is the mossy lowlands, there's the highlands, and there's the oceans. And that's as many as there are as far as I'm aware. But I did decide to drive to the mossy lowlands because I thought, well, the power situation isn't looking great. The wind turbines aren't working because, as I mentioned earlier, the atmosphere is a little bit too thin. Although they have worked at some points when I did some test runs, so I don't really know what's going on there. But I thought, well, we might as well drive the first bit before switching over to Bon Voyage, and that's what we are doing right now. I've got the menu up, so what we can do is we can go to the map, we can click on a point, we can hit go to the tracking station, and with a little bit of video editing, well, I time warped ahead 2 days, and magically, we have appeared at this new destination, which is great. I didn't have to drive that, and that would have taken, I think, probably about 15 hours or so of driving. And I can just leave it to be done in the background. Bon Voyage is such a fantastic mod, especially once things are rescaled like they are here. But anyway, as Sticker, Phineas and Herman, as they were at the beach, they decided they wanted to go for a little bit of a swim. Really, I just wanted to do this to see if we got different science from splashed at Lua rather than landed, and we do. So that was great. However, what wasn't great was trying to figure out how to get back to the shore. Yes, I didn't really think too far ahead with this one, but riding the waves a little bit, we are able to get those back wheels contact onto the floor and, well, the ground, the mud, the mossy lowlands, and we are able to drive ourselves out of that little bit of a predicament that we got ourselves in. Then we just ended up bon voyaging all the way over to the Main Ridge Highlands before finally arriving back at the lander after 90 days on the surface of Lua. Yeah, we spent quite a while, and I actually transmitted 3 full lots of data from the lab. That's why I wanted to stay down for so long, so I could run that lab for as long as possible. Something else that I did for science with this mission as well is I took 2 samples of everything, because one of them went to providing data into the laboratory, which we can then convert into pure science. And then the others we kept on ourselves, and I've stored those in the lander so we can take the samples back and get even more science that way. This is just a complete science grab mission. I want to gain as much science as I possibly can from this. But we were able to make it back to orbit just fine with the Lua ascent vehicle. And just like that, we're back at road. It was a bit of a toasty re-entry. Hernan Kerman almost passed out due to the G-forces, but we were able to bring these three safely back home. And hopefully, they will provide us with a bounty full of science. So, with them touched down, let's have a look at what we get. We get 2,346 science points, which I don't think is quite as much as I've earned so far in the series in total, but that is pretty close. That is by far the most successful mission I have done in this series by a long way. So what we're going to do is we are going to come into research and development. I picked up some new electronics technology. We picked up nuclear engines, some new advanced science experiments which are going to be able to provide us with the ability to drill for resources so we can start setting up permanent bases in future episodes. That is something that I'm very excited to set up because obviously this series is about colonization. But I think next episode we'll be going to Gateway for the first time. But until then, I have been Carnasa and I will see you later.